give our digital round of applause, our digital finger snaps to Camille Dungy.
Hello. Um, Thanks for coming. I'm really happy with those names that are on the side there. So it's good to virtually see you. Of course, I wish that I could be physically present in Rochester. You guys were all so sweet to me when I was there in October, but here I am. In this manner. And thanks, of course, to Writers and Books for your ongoing support, for making sure that copies of this new book were in the store. And I always encourage everybody, support your local bookstores, particularly local bookstores that do such incredible programming and connecting with writers and books and readers and books, etc. So thanks for all that. Um, okay, so I'm going to read just for a little bit from this new book, which officially was published yesterday. That date kept changing. It was supposed to be March 4th, and then it was March 17th, and now it's March 24th. And it feels like that is all part of the book. The delays, I think, had a lot to do with tariffs, actually, and the difficulty of the printer getting the materials that they needed to get enough copies of the book stocked at small bookstores, yes, but also that big behemoth monopoly place that drives all kinds of things about the commerce around books. And so it felt frustrating and also so fitting that a book that was very much thinking through questions of what it meant to insist on being seen, insist on loving and being loved in a culture and a place where sometimes that is difficult to see evidence of that love being returned, just kept being sort of pushed back and delayed. And so all that is to say, I feel really blessed and lucky and happy that what has now turned out to be this launch event is here with Writers and Books, which has been an organization that has continually shown me love um, for some time. And I'm happy to be able to reciprocate that attention. So America a Love Story is actually a slim volume. I wanted a book that could be something of a nice little snack, a book you might be able to carry around with you, a book that you could read and reread and absorb in a manageable set of doses. My most recent book was a prose memoir with some poems riddled throughout it, and that process of just writing all of those words made me want to really think again about the beauties of poetry and its more concise way of using language and deploying ideas and imagery. And so a lot of these poems are considering how to say as much as I possibly can with a smaller amount of space to do so. And so that memoir was called Soil, the story of a Black mother's garden. And here is perhaps much of what I think through in the 400-page book in a poem that is only 16 lines long. The Garden. I have taught you the stakes. What you love, others will also love. What you desire, the same. Some will assure you there is a place on earth for everyone. I will prove them wrong. The sun bakes us brown as dirt. My dear, we are dirt. Wait for crops to grow ripe. You may wake to find everything shot through with holes. There are many ways a life can end. I have taught you. What you love, others will find ways to take. Nothing is left to teach that the garden won't prove. I was thinking a lot as I was writing these poems about what love is, where it comes from, what forces resist our ability to love the way we want to, and the people that we want to, and with the outcomes that we want to. And I ended up writing a series of poems that think somewhat, sometimes etymologically, about words connected with love, and sometimes in terms of like the cultural imaginings of what love means and looks like. So here's an example. As if a fairy tale, my love. In the old story, the woman wants everything: a bigger bird for the pot, a brick house instead of a cottage. Yes, she wants a better boat for her husband, the fisherman. She is hungry. She asks for their plates to be constantly full. But the story exaggerates. She never thought to ask that her plates be cast of gold. It was the wind cutting through the cottage's straw that made her ask for the house. Her poor husband, always in danger, hardly protected on land or at sea. What to believe? I have never been as greedy as I am when I'm with you. I want everything I feed you to be more delicious than anything you've tasted before. I hope the next leg I offer will be more filling than the last. The fisherman goes out to sea, and the woman worries. Why not risk imagining a life that doesn't depend on her love's daily peril? The woman has never had a mirror she trusted. She wants a spectacular mirror with inlays of pearl. Why not ask for what I want? Yes? Yes. I love you. I want you to remember that. But the woman I know knows nobody lives on memories alone, no matter how lovely they are. So there's another love story in this book, in addition to like that romantic love that I am talking about a lot, in addition to questions of like love of place, love of region, of home. There's another person that I have a deeply complicated love affair with. Golden age. I was closer in age to the baby than to the me I am now. On an island, summer. There were 8 of us. We had nothing to do. I don't remember sleeping. We had so much to do. We took turns reading The Hobbit to each other. What would it be like to live in some other, almost ours world? We ate fresh fish, veggies, drank lots of beer. Some of us kissed. We only took care of each other. We only took care of ourselves. We swam through the days, argued just a bit. Some others kissed. Nothing about us resembled our lives now. Nothing about me has changed. One afternoon, I got up from my towel and started walking. Where are you going? Somebody asked. Toward the horizon, I told her. That friend would come to my wedding, would come to my baby shower. Should I tell the others you'll be gone a while? She asked. Yes, I said. Please, tell the others I'll be gone a while. And this is another poem connected to that first in a way that I'll explain in just a bit. I was going to read that, but I'm going to read a different one. And in the meantime, I'll tell you the way it's connected. I found out after I had my daughter that the average mother loses 700 hours of sleep in the first year of her child's life. And that figure blew me away, but also explained a lot. And so I decided to write a series of pieces that involved that statistic. And these pieces are exactly 700 characters long, not words, but characters long. And so they're like deeply persnickety in that way, because I had to watch the character count and try and change language to work, but also absolutely invisible in the way that much of the labor of love, labor of care that we do in the world, and definitely caregiving, parental giving, elder care, all of those kinds of caregiving that we do is often invisible labor. And so these 700 character poems, like the one that I just read and the one that I'm about to read, are ways of my thinking through how time is lost when we're doing this perpetual labor of loving, caring in this world. And also reveal some of the things that keep us up and account for those lost 700 hours. Poem revised in a 12th floor hotel room after noticing a man in the building across the street was holding binoculars. The baby sings in her high chair at the banquet. I know most people at our table, but not everyone. The keynote speaker talks about how to make beauty in today's world. A woman we met during cocktails whispers that she wants a picture of the baby. Ray would say no. He thinks he can protect her, but I don't. Sure, I said, go ahead. The baby sings in her high chair. An artist at our table doodles a sketch and gives it to me. Princess Callie, reads the caption. Thanks, I say. This will go up on her wall. Meta keeps copies of every photograph ever posted on those sites, even if the poster deletes the original. A man approaches when the keynote is finished. Your daughter is beautiful. I videotaped her while you ate. George Lucas owns the rights to all profits made from Carrie Fisher's girlish face. This is how we've dealt with beauty in today's world. And I'll close with one more poem that is a different version of questions of love and connection and possibility despite many of the messages and realities that are also true in this world. One night in 1888, as the French steamboat Abdelkader powered from Marseille to Algiers, news reports proclaim the sky became quite black with swallows. The channel between one life and another has always been subject to sudden explosions. Those swallows must have been exhausted. The birds alighted in the thousands on the sails, ropes, and yards of the Abdel Qadir. I began with birds, thousands. Some wandered into cabins, ate from passengers' delighted hands. I will return to the birds, but you should know the Abdel Qadir was named for a man who died 5 years before they blacked the sky around the boat that bore his name. If you don't know how many died, how many more he saved in the decades of conflict between France and Algiers while Abdel Qadir was emir, maybe you won't know what a wonder this was to report. I read about it in the New York Times. This must have sounded in those days like the stories we hear now of cranes, white capped, white napped, who nest nowhere securely but along Korea's demilitarized zone. Those winged strangers remained all night on the vessel, the article claims. In the morning, fed and rested, they flew off for coastal islands still controlled by Spain, which, as you know, once kept as its own our neighbors, Honduras, El Salvador, Mexico. I've been trying to write about the Abdel Qadir swallows for more years than I am able to count. Yesterday, you apologized for arriving late for dinner. You'd seen a small, bent woman walking with heavy bags near the grocery store, and you stopped to ask if she would let you drive her home. You are the size of Black man people here consider frightening. The woman must have been exhausted. She settled her body in the cabin, and you carried her safely home. Some days, especially as I'm reminded of how we fight the animals we are, who need to migrate as much as we need to settle, to stay, how we'll tear apart and strand and starve and slaughter that part of us that takes flight from one place to some other. I try to recreate this. A rather curious episode in natural history occurred the other day. The story I love so much begins. Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, I love you all. There's like a bunch of names of people who I'm like, thanks for tuning in.
Are are we spotlit?
We're Spotlit.
I believe
It's
you are.
us.
Hi there, Camille.
Hi, Jennifer.
Congratulations on this book and thank you. That was a beautiful reading.
Thank you.
America, a love story. I wanted to, one of the first things you said when you started talking was about how you wanted to fit as much as possible in as small a space.
Hmm.
And that made complete sense to me because one of the things I wanted to ask you about, and one of the things I really enjoyed in a way that I almost never do when I'm reading a book of poems, is your note section. You have an unusual in section of notes, and a lot of American poets are writing notes in their books now. I know with my last book, my I didn't have any, and my publisher kind of bugged me to. And then I obliged a little bit. But I'm actually tend to be someone who's a little against notes. But your note section is actually like a poem itself. It's really
Hmm.
brilliantly written. And it does this thing that I think is what you were talking about at the beginning, which was um, it takes pressure off the poems to, at least some of the poems, to be expository in certain ways that might detract from the lyricism or the directness that they are determined to have. And I really loved that. And I guess I wanted to just ask you, did your publisher ask you to do the notes? Did you know that that was going to be part of the book? I'm just curious.
They didn't ask me to do them. I think that there were sometimes definitely just a little bit more information that people seek or want that would be useful, but it didn't need to necessarily be in the poems itself. For instance, I said in that last poem that I've been thinking about the Abdul Qadir swallows for more years than I'm able to count, but actually it was 17 years 1 week and 4 days, right? I'm like, sorry, 17 years, 1 week and 4 hours. I can specifically count. I have been thinking about the Abdul Qadir swallows, but that detail sidelines the idea that was in the poem. For the poem, we just need like a lot of time. That's all that the poem needed. But for the note section, that 1 week and 4 hours was that I was working at the Minnesota Northwoods Writers Conference with my friend Sean Hill, and I was teaching a class, and I was having students. They brought in poems that were close to, like, they liked the idea, but they couldn't make it a poem. And that was what we worked with for the week. And I had them do things like take scissors and glue and tape to their poems. We would go out on walks and actually put pieces of grass or flowers or things onto the page. I was having them blow up their poem and bring the world into the poem and make space for their poems. And then I got home from it, and Amy Nasuka Matado, who was at the time the poetry editor at Orion, asked me for a poem that afternoon. She was at a tight deadline. Do you have something? I need it in 4 hours. And I did not. But I had this Abdul Qadir Swallows idea, and I just had a week of telling other people to blow their poems up and bring other worlds into them. And the speed at which I was able to come up with the poem that you just heard in that state from Amy's call 4 hours before had everything to do with 17 years of thinking about it, and also that week of working it. And that sounds like really great note information. And that is, that back information is in the notes and adds a different lens to, or maybe a broader kind of lens to the poems. But I also get really bored at just notes that are afterthoughts. And so it was important to me that the note section was a lyric, right? Had a poetic quality to it, moved in a way that it was enjoyable to read, and was engaging, so that the information that I delivered in those notes and the extra details that I delivered in those notes could come for the person who reads it as an additional pleasure of the book.
That makes complete sense. And yeah, that's it. There's actually dramatic tension, and then I can't think of, maybe since The Wasteland, reading notes with dramatic tension in them before. And there's a lot I learned in the notes. There's two things I wanted to ask you about. One thing that comes out in the notes is that you point out, I think this is right at the beginning, that this book of poetry took you 10 years to write. And I wanted to ask you just about that too. Like, how did that process compare to the way your other books of poems came? And then maybe also related to that, when did you discover that these obsessions were so abiding? Because even though it's a book that spans 10 years in the making, it reads that way in terms of ambition, but it doesn't read that way in terms of lack of cohesion or directness or obsession. Can you say anything about that?
Well, part of it is that I mean, I probably could have gone two different ways with a book when I haven't published a book of poems since 2017. So I could very well, this could have been my new and selected kind of moment. And I could have new poems and do a retrospective of other poems. And at one point, I thought that that might be the direction. And it was just not, it did not hold narrative tension for me, right? Like it just like, it was just, I I needed a why. I needed a really driving why that had to be more than just, hey, people, I've been writing poems, you know? Um, our world is so chaotic and busy, and there's so many demands on all of our time and our attention. And if I'm going to have the honor of somebody spending time with a book of mine, I want it not, I want it to matter, right? I want to give them something in return. And so as I was looking at all of these poems that I have written over the last 10 years, I realized that I did have this singular obsession with these questions of connection, love, place, community, and that could be the revolving, the gravitational field around which these poems revolved. And if poems didn't really fit with that, maybe they're for another project. And so that's part of how it got small, is that just keeping with the things that really abided by with that central set of concerns. This is different than other books of mine. There's no place in the book where the title shows up. Like there's no title poem, there's no, oh, that's the line that comes from. The closest that you get are 3 poems in the collection that directly address America.
Yeah.
And then there are some other poems that are very clearly about America. But it's not the title just at some point became also one of the containers that I was thinking about the poems. How are these part of a love story that are specific to the US, right? Like to my experience of being a person who lives in this country.
Well, also I think the book really makes one see the way in which lots of different kinds of poems and lots of different relationships are love stories, are about love. And there's a way when I was reading that I could see it wasn't just the personal and the political. It was like overlapping circles of how the love for a mother's love for a daughter was related to a love for America, was related to running over a cat, was related to all different kinds of things that I didn't know before that. And since you brought it up, I wanted to ask you too about, I really love the poems that are addressed to America and the moments when you just come out and say America, blah blah blah, the collective noun of it. And I mean, I know Allen Ginsberg did it. I know, I don't know if you have read a bunch of Kenneth Koch, but he went through that period where he was addressing poems to like impossible things like America or World War II. Um, did you choose? I mean, did that really change what you were able to say in a poem, or did that, was that something that you did just to see what the effect would be? You know, like in grad school, we used to have this joke where we would just test the line, you must change your life, and put it at the end of all of our poems just to see if what it did to the poem. And there was part of me when I was reading your book, I was like, God, what would happen if I put Dear America in front of my poems? Because it just widens the aperture of the poem right away. But what was your thinking about that, if you have any things to share?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the two that you mentioned, Ginsberg, yes. Kenneth Koch, yes. Whitman,
Yeah.
and Langston Hughes.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, of course.
right? Those were all kind of energy fields. Also a little bit like um there's something like Adrienne Rich, there's like a little energy that she had in that kind of thing. But partially was those poems, the first two, which are in fact the first and the last poem in the book. There's a poem called "This'll Hurt Me More," where
Mhm.
I talk about my grandmother reaching for a switch when she wanted me to change, and me working through the idea of what a switch could mean. And then the last poem, there's bears and fire and domestic violence and will I get out alive kinds of questions. um, in both of those, they did feel like in the drafting, they felt like they wanted a you to be addressed.
Mhm.
Um, but I didn't want the confusion that you has is often that that's going to be your love interest, right? And I didn't want my sweet Ray tied up with that confusion of who that you is. Um, and eventually I realized that there really was a very specific you, and that you was this particular kind of American energy. The poems were written out of moments of giant cultural crisis. They were written in periods of protest and frustration, and I kept thinking about why I was not as surprised by the things that were just rocking my white friends' worlds about America. And like all those like, this isn't the country that I know. I'm like, it's not? Like, really? And so I just decided to be straight. Like, this is the country I know. This is the America I know. And so let me just call it what it is and speak directly to that, as opposed to trying to be coy.
Yeah. Well, that first poem that you're alluding to, "This'll Hurt Me More," is just a triumph. And the way in which it begins with the violence of the switch, but it also ends with "America, bring me a switch." So, but there's this wonderful pun in it, like
Mm-hmm.
it's time for a change. It's
Mm-hmm.
just so exciting to me. It also, you're pointing to something else about the book that I really think is special, which is it begins and ends with some dark places. I
Mm-hmm.
think those are two of the darkest poems as well. And I think that's so you just used the word direct, but um, which is right. I was thinking of the word of like, well, I was thinking of candor, but I was thinking of negative capability too, that to tell a love story, but to tell it with all of the ambivalence and complexity, which is a form of respect and love that it deserves. Um, that's also the enterprise behind the book. And I don't know, you work in many different realms, modes. You're a teacher, you're an editor, you're a poet, you write essays. But my personal um, prejudice, I guess, is that poetry is a sort of irreplaceable technology for talking specifically about or capturing that kind of ambivalence um, without dissolving any of it. And I wondered if you felt that way too. Like now that you are trafficking in all these different genres, like does poetry still hold a special place for you? For
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it just demands more of the English language.
Yeah,
And people who read poetry trust the language more, and and trust the multiplicity of emotion and feeling and understanding that poetry allows. And so I like writing poems for poetry readers. Right. Which is not me saying that I'm trying to write something that's sort of high minded and only a certain number of people can access. It's me saying that I like writing poems for people who are willing to explore the wide breadth of possibility that the world offers. And so
Mhm.
poetry readers are they're the best.
They are the best. They- Poets aren't too bad either.
Poets are
I,
good.
I know I'm looking at the clock and I can see that it's getting time to open it to questions, but I want to ask you one more, sneak in one more if I can, which is about the again something I learned in the notes about the 700 character poems. I there are lots of forms that you use in the I mean there's love poems, there's litanies, there's catalog, there's a ghazal I remember. But the form that's so captivating to me is the one that is undetectable, that I didn't even know I had been reading until I get to the notes section. And I'm so moved um, by the notion of that, of making a form that's invisible the way that our love and labor, and particularly the care of, I think, Black women and Black mothers, that the way that that's completely invisible, yet no less stringent and exacting of a form. I mean, I won't be forgetting about that form for a long time. And I don't know if you gave it a name or not, but it's so special to me I think when so many poets work in forms, I think of them sometimes as like designer brands, like I'm wearing a pair of Sonnet jeans, like like you if you put that label on it, it actually gives it attention and glorifies it or dignifies it. But you've made this humble, very loving form. I just think it's fantastic. I mean, I know you said the 700 hours, but do you want to talk about how that idea occurred to you to make this form?
I love everything that you said, and I'm glad that Tyler has that recorded because because I think you hit on a lot of the things that became clear to me as I kept going. And it also was I was so busy in the time that I was writing so many of these poems. And so it was a form that required a kind of exactness and attention and care, but also allowed me to take what were often journal entries and shift these journal entries into a more poetic mode, but keep the plain spoken language of them. So many other poetic forms enforce something that is not the way we speak and not the way that we move. And so I wanted something that was much more vernacular,
Mhm.
um, and and that is one of the issues with more vernacular decisions, is that they appear to be not as stringent and not as fancy. But this was really hard. I mean, one of the crazy things about, like when I was talking about it, I said it's not word count. If you're working on a word count, a lot of us are used to working on word count, and okay, well, I'll just make have and have not one word, and then that shrinks the words, but that does not change the character count at all. It's the same number of characters. So the easy solutions for how to pull back are
Oh,
not available to me. And I have to be much more creative with language to be able to say all the things I want to say, but with this really quite limited character, parameter.
yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people said similar things about syllabics, that they weren't, because you couldn't hear it it didn't count.
Right.
It definitely, it definitely counts, but and it's just astringent. It's just with a different objective, I suppose.
And I think I've played a lot with syllabics through my whole career and have had that pushback as well, that it didn't count, or that my sonnets aren't really sonnets because they're just syllabic. They're not accentual syllabics, etc. And maybe that was part of it. I was like, the thing that I'm doing anyway, the people who are going to say I'm not good enough have already been saying I'm not good enough. So let me just be myself as
Mhm.
fully as possible, and not even um people will either choose to attend and honor my work, or they won't, and I'm kind of done trying to make people see that I am worthy of that attention. I'm going to be my best version of myself as I understand that.
Amen. I don't know if there's any questions. If there aren't, I'm going to keep asking you. So, yeah, Tyler, why don't you jump in?
I was just snapping. That was a lovely quote. We're gonna have to pull that. I love that. But yeah, anyone feel free to type a question into the chat. If you'd like, you can also turn on your microphone and ask your question aloud, but feel free to type it in the chat. I was just wondering if I could ask a question in the meantime while people are thinking. I'm curious about this poem in the book New Address that is all about your name and the meaning of your name, and kind of meditating on um, the ways that you have witnessed sacrifice in your life. I really like this poem a lot, and it reminds me that when I would teach high school, I would often have students do a lesson with them where they would learn the meaning of their name by looking it up on, one of those online name etymology things, and then have them kind of write in response to that. And I wonder where the kind of inspiration for this poem came from, and um, how you settled on not really like renaming yourself, but you've decided to like, or not redefining your name. That's often the direction students would take it, as like, oh, the dictionary means this. I think my name means this. But I like that you leaned into, you're like, I'm going to find the places in my life where I have witnessed sacrifice. But I wonder if you could talk about the process of writing this poem, because I really love it. I love the repetition too.
Yeah, part of that with that poem is that I have a fair number of poems about my father. I have a couple in America Love Story, and I have others in other books. I guess I'm a daddy's girl, and I don't really have that many poems about my mother. And so I thought I should maybe do that for and write a poem about my mother. And this is what came from that. And there's a certain way in which when poems really begin to speak to or through me, that where things go is a mystery. I have always known that my name means witness at the sacrifice, and that has always been a thing like that I have thought about, like what are the implications of that fact. And somehow that realization, the puzzle form, and writing about my mother just pulled this poem out of me. And that, so there is an example where I think also the form was important, because I have to keep coming back to this word sacrifice. I can't run away from it. And so I learned more and more at every turn in it.
Thank you. Yeah, if we don't have any questions from the audience, Jen, do you want to maybe ask one last one to close us out?
If it's one last one, then I want to ask well, two things.
Yeah, yeah, no, no,
It's
no need to limit you. We've got time.
um, so I can't take the opportunity talking to another poet to not ask you what are you reading? What were your influences for this book? One of the things I miss about being on social media was what you and Callie were baking, pictures of that, and then also what you were reading? I feel like you're just a really good person to ask that question to. So you want to share anything that helped you write the book or that you've been reading recently that you're just excited about?
Well, I've been reading Willa Cather recently,
Yeah.
Jennifer, because I get to go to Breadloaf this summer and talk about the influence of Willa Cather on my work. And I think that it actually fits because all of Willa Cather's novels are love stories, but the love is not straightforward. It's often a love of a mentor for his student, or a young woman in a prairie town who loves opera, and the people who love her enough to make the sacrifices necessary that she can become an opera star. The love is often very weird and buried or warped sometimes by the realities of life in this growing American experiment, right? And often by lots of different people from many different cultures coming into one space and trying to make their own best lives in conflict with each other. So Willa Cather, I started reading Willa Cather when I was a teenager, and I returned to her quite regularly. And over these last couple of years, I've been reading her more voraciously. And thinking. So that's one person I just suggest. But that's a novelist, and you're probably interested in my poetry answers. I in this like season, I have been really, really in love with two books. One is Patricia Smith's Intentions of Thunder, which is her new and selected, and she does new and selected right. Right, like she makes an urgency of how to create a new and selected in a way that I have not seen for years, to really understand why this new book needs to be its own thing. So Patricia Smith's that is just a gorgeous book. And Juliana Spar has, on the opposite end, Patricia Smith's book's probably 300 plus page, and Juliana Spar, also on Wesleyan Press, has a new book called Ars Poetica. And it's, I think, 8 longish poems, but also under 100 pages, another really slim book, essentially. And this, why poetry now? Why poetry in this moment of necessary protest? Why poetry in this moment of climate catastrophe? Why are we doing this decorative thing in a world that needs our work and our attention? And that's the kind of question that I'm interested in America, a Love Story as well. So when I picked up Juliana Spar's, I have a line that goes through Soil where it's a Degas, apparently the first time he saw a whole retrospective of Mary Cassatt's work, said, voila, here is someone who thinks as I do. And that's how I feel about the Juliana Spar Ars Poetica book.
Fantastic. I'm so glad that I got to sneak that question in. Thank you.
I wonder if I can jump in and feed a question from Cynthia. She asked, do you have topics that you won't write about, Camille?
Oh, that's such an interesting question, Cynthia. No, I don't. I will write about anything because I don't publish everything that I write. So I'm perfectly willing to write about anything. And there are definitely a few poems in America, a Love Story, that you will never hear me read when I give a reading because I'm like shy about what's in the poem. But it's true. The information I say in the poem is true. There's nothing that I need to be embarrassed about. Callie, my daughter, read most of America of Love Story, but right before she got to one of the pages, I put a sticky note over it. I was like, you don't want to read that poem. There's no information in there that you need to know about your mother and father. So I wrote the poem. I published the poem. I'm just not going to be on a mic reading that poem out loud, right? And I think that that's the thing for me. Be as honest, as completely honest, and then decide my level of how much I want to share it. So there's sometimes poems that I may not publish, but usually by the time I've finished a poem, I'm okay publishing it. Just not okay reciting it.